Hi folks, Mr. Whipple here. We're going to be running through the three basic steps that are required to solve just about any trigonometric equation. So we're going to use one example to do that. So let's get started. So here we have an equation where we're going to be solving for all values of x. But before we actually get into worrying about x, we need to actually solve for a couple of other things first, because we have lots of layers here. So the first step is going to be solving for the trig function. As you can see, so either solving for sine, cosine, or tangent. So we're going after solving for the cosine part, and we're not even going to worry about the 2x, all right? So this is usually, well, sometimes this is the easiest part. In this problem, it's not too difficult. Why don't you pause the video and see what you can do to solve for the cosine. You'll actually end up with cosine of 2x equals something. All right, check and see if this is what you got. So now we have, just subtracting the 1 over and then dividing by 2, we have that the cosine of 2x is equal to -1/2. All right, so the next step is going to be solve for all values of the angle. And this is perhaps the most crucial step. And this is the one you were practicing on the earlier worksheet for this section. In fact, I'm going to put a big star next to this step because it is that important. Okay, so we need to solve for all values of the angle. Now the first question is, what is the angle? If we look over here, is the angle x? But you may recall we've talked about how you always take the sine, cosine, or tangent of an angle. So let's see. So let's write that here just to remind you. So we're going to take the cosine of an angle, right? And that equals our ratio. Okay, so our angle is not x, right? In this case, the angle is 2x. So if you want to replace, you could replace, the 2x with a y if you like. I usually just leave it as 2x. So why don't you pause the video again and see if you can figure out what are all the values that 2x can be. This is actually one you should be able to do without a calculator. Okay, check and see if this is what you got. Hopefully you remember that there are two places within one revolution of the unit circle where the cosine of an angle is going to be -1/2. One of them is in the second quadrant, right, at 2 pi over 3. And then, of course, you want to get all of its coterminal angles, so we add plus 2 pi k. And then the other one is at 4 pi over 3. Plus 2 pi k. So this is very similar to when, whenever you had to solve something like, y or x squared. Let's see if I can write this out. Solve something like x squared equal to 9. You would end up with two different answers, right? And you'd have to actually write it as two separate equations. X equals 3 or x equals -3. All right, so we have that happening here. All right, now there's just one more step left and we should be done. So our final step now is, of course, simply to solve for the variable, right? Now we can finally get down to solving for x once we have determined all the values for the angle, which we have done. So you've taken it this far. Why don't you finish it out, pause the video, and see what you end up with for x. Is this what you got? The final answer, as you can see, is pi over 3 plus pi k. Or we could have x equal to 2 pi over 3 plus pi k. Of course, I took it in a couple of steps. Just remember that when we divide by 2, we got to divide everything by 2. So I usually like to think about it as multiplying by 1/2, and that helps me remember to distribute that 1/2 over everything. So we're not adding 2 pi k here, we're just adding pi k in the end. And now if the if the problem kind of specified, said maybe find all values between, say, 0 and 2 pi, right? If we said we're looking for all values of x between 0 and 2 pi, we could use our answer to get these, right? We could start with, let's see, we could start with a pi over 3, and then if we add pi to that, I believe we'll be at 4 pi over 3. And if we add pi to that, I think we might be out of range because that would be 7 pi over 3. So let's then come over to the 2 pi over 3 answer. That's certainly one of them. And then if we add pi to that, I believe we'll have, what, 5 pi over 3. And if we add another pi to that, we'll be at 8 pi over 3, and that would be just a bit too far. So we actually end up with 4 answers here between 0 and 2 pi. Okay, so in review, remember there are 3 basic steps, right? First, you solve for the trig function. Get that by itself, and it'll be the function of an angle. Then the big step is make sure you find all values of that angle, which we did here in the red step. And then the final step is simply to solve for the variable if you haven't already. Sometimes when you find the angle, you will already have the variable solved. But okay, good luck with problems of this type.